Welcome to Whistler's Vital Signs, an initiative of the Community Foundation of Whistler that seeks to connect and engage our community as a means to gauge its overall vitality. Whistler's Vital Signs with your host, Kim Slater, starts now.
The focus of today's podcast is poverty. To explore this tough topic, I am so grateful to be speaking with Sarah Jennings. She was born and raised right here in Whistler, and she is the coordinator of the Whistler Food Bank, a program of the Whistler Community Services Society. She's also an activist for environmental and social change, both locally and abroad. She's a veritable force who I consider a great source of inspiration. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Last February, you hosted a Vital Cafe entitled, Yes, There Is Poverty in Whistler. That's quite a provocative title. Can you share how it came about?
Yeah, so often when I tell people that I work for the food bank, people are surprised that there is a food bank in Whistler and that people in Whistler face some of the same issues that other people face globally.
So what do you think, aside from the fact that there is poverty, what do you think the greatest myth or misconception is about poverty in our community?
So the biggest myth, I would say, is that most of the people accessing the food bank are young adults and they're seasonal workers. And this is not the case. We do see young adults and seasonal workers accessing our services, but we also see many seniors. We see young families. We see families with teenagers. We see single adults. We see couples. We see a wide spectrum of the community that are facing a challenging time and need our help.
Yes, in recent years, The Guardian and other news sources have reported that 1 in 3 families are one paycheck away from homelessness. That's truly shocking.
Yeah, we do have a lot of families that face needs in the community. In 2018, we served food to families or to children on 677 times. So that shows that there is a great need in the community. So those were families that may have accessed the food on multiple times. As families do need support longer, they have more mouths to feed. So obviously it's more of a challenge for families in the community to get all the things that they need to survive.
So it sounds like young families in particular with young children are vulnerable. Are there any other segments of the population who are particularly vulnerable?
Yeah, we see a lot of, one sector actually I'd like to speak to that is often sort of forgotten in the community is sort of the older adult male who has worked in a very physical job for a while and their body has been wrecked. They're injured and they can no longer work and they don't necessarily fit the picture for a job in the tourism sector. There's a misconception that people in the tourism sector want to see younger folks or friendly older women, and sometimes these older men that have worked hard physical jobs just don't fit that image. And so they have a hard time retraining for other work in the community, and they sometimes struggle. And this also leads sometimes to isolation. And so we do see a number of single adult males who have worked in the trades that are accessing our services. And we also see a lot of long-term locals that have been here for 10 years or more, and some of them are in their senior years. And frankly, the pension is not enough to sustain them, and they have a hard time staying in the community and affording to live here in the community that they have been for sometimes decades.
Right, because of course the community itself is changing. So there may be some folks who are finding at different points of time in their life where at maybe some points they're able to make ends meet and at other points they're not. Do you see that happening? There's kind of in and out cycles of vulnerability or precarity?
Yeah, so poverty is something in most people's lives, not just in Whistler, that is faced for a short term. It may be a year or two, but it's still a shorter term of that person's life. So people move in and out of facing poverty. It's usually something that has come about at a certain point in their life and makes it difficult for them to address their financial situation at that time, and they just need the support to get them through to whatever next stage life will bring for them.
So, thinking back to when you hosted the Vital Cafe, did any of this come as a surprise to the folks in the room?
Yeah, I think most of the people that came had some idea that there were people who were facing a challenge in Whistler. But I think even within that group of people that have that base knowledge, there's still some of those misconceptions about who faces poverty and what the reasons for that poverty are. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but also on how best to address poverty.
Of course, we will in a moment, actually. Do you recall some of the conversations there around what poverty means, the very meaning of poverty, were there kind of different takes on what poverty is, particularly in Whistler?
Yeah, I mean, I think poverty means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. The people that I see at the food bank are a sector of the community that are facing poverty, but they're not the most impoverished in the community either. And I think that was a big surprise for people, that some of the people that are facing things like homelessness and deep addictions and mental health issues, those folks are not necessarily accessing the food bank because they're at a survival level. They're not making their own food. They're not taking food home to a kitchen and able to make themselves 3 meals a day. So the level of poverty I see at the food bank is one window, but it's not the depth of poverty that we see in some individuals within the community and other communities outside of Whistler.
Yeah, you really see how poverty is entwined with other social challenges. You mentioned mental health and substance use. How do you see it relating to other challenges as well, including affordable housing, healthcare, an aging population, or even climate change?
I mean, that's a big question. Poverty is something that occurs because people aren't, they need to have that space support. They need to have a community wrapped around them to support them so that they don't face poverty in the first place. And I'm just going to get into, I want to share a story.
Great, I love stories.
So I first heard this story at a conference on poverty reduction, and it just really well describes what we need to do to reduce poverty and how we currently address poverty in most of the in most communities and the province and around the world. So I want you to imagine a bunch of adults around a river, and they're, I don't know, maybe having a picnic or something. And then suddenly they see a child coming down the river being swept away. And so they run into the river, they save this child, and then another child comes, they run in, they save that child. And then over time, more and more children are appearing, coming down the river, and they're in distress. The adults are going in, pulling them out of the river, and children just keep coming, and people are occupied trying to save these children. And then one adult chooses to leave, and the other adults are very upset by this. They can't imagine that this adult is leaving in the time of greatest need. They need this adult there to help pull the children out of the river to stop them from drowning. As time goes on, fewer and fewer children are coming down the river. And then they stop, there's no more children coming down the river, and the other adult returns. The adults that were pulling the children out of the river are livid, they're upset. They say to this person, "How could you leave when we needed you most?" And they turn to this person in anger, and that person says, "I wanted to know what was happening, why these children were coming down the river. So I went upstream, I saw that there was a bridge that was broken, it needed to be fixed. I got somebody to fix the bridge, and the children now can cross the bridge and not fall into the river." That story is a picture of how we currently address poverty by pulling children out of the river when we need to be building the bridge. And so even I work for Whistler Community Services, and I love the work that we do, but most of what we do is pulling children out of the river.
Yeah, it's curative as opposed to preventative.
Yes, it's, the other analogy is the Band-Aid solution. It is a Band-Aid. So we need to address the bridge or fix healthcare in the other analogy, so that we need to address poverty at its root, at where it originates from. So we need to address poverty at the provincial, federal, and municipal levels to make sure that people are not falling through the cracks. We need to make sure that people have things like affordable childcare. We need to make sure they have access to health care. We need to make sure that people who are currently marginalized are not done so, that they're treated equally to the rest of society. We need to make sure that people have access to affordable housing and a lot of other pensions are a good point. We see a lot of people in Whistler accessing the food bank that are surviving off pensions. We need to make sure that those pensions are enough to sustain living in community. And same with the other supports like long-term disability supports. It's not enough to live on, and that's something that needs to be addressed. When people get injured or hurt in Whistler and they need help, they need to know that there is a system in place that can support them through their time of need. But instead, they aren't getting enough financially, and then they have to rely on services such as the food bank to get them by.
You've offered some really excellent ideas around what can happen at the sort of the higher levels, provincially and federally. I'm wondering what you think for our local community. You know, what can we do as individuals at the household level, at the community level, and kind of up to, you know, something that's maybe more like a Whistler centric solution. I think of it, you know, I imagine the community of Whistler as a blanket, and it's comprised of many threads woven together. So, you know, do we think about this blanket as far as, you know, where we see threads that are tightly woven that we can kind of use as pieces that are quite strong in supporting community members, and where do we see that perhaps there's threads that are loose or frayed that are allowing some members to fall through the cracks?
So I think there's quite a few things we can do locally. First of all, we need to build up our community to make sure that no one is left behind, that every member of our community feels supported and welcomed, and that we remain connected with each other. A lot of times when people start to face poverty, they might pull away. They might not do as much with their friends and family that they used to. And you need to take note of that and pull them back in, talk to them, see what's going on, and see if you can help them individually. That's on an individual basis and a community basis. And then I think we need to advocate for changes. We need to call on our local, provincial, and federal governments to step up and take care of people when they're in need. Obviously, the topic of housing in Whistler is a huge one. When we talk about housing in Whistler, we need to remember that there's a spectrum of housing. We need things. We need housing for our homeless folks. We need housing for those that can't afford Whistler Housing Authority rates, such as social housing. We need housing for women who are fleeing abusive situations, or you know, men also who are dealing with situations like that. We need to make sure that we have a wide range of housing available for people in need.
Wow, that's really a robust set of solutions there, a lot to work with. Can you share some resources?
I think one of my best resources for things around poverty is the Poverty Coalition of BC. I hope I remember that name correctly. But if you search up those names, you will find them. And they are a wealth of information on how best to address poverty in BC, and also the stats behind who's facing poverty, why they're facing poverty, and what we as community members can do to call for change.
So what kinds of things are happening in our community as far as addressing poverty? Perhaps touching on the role of the food bank in addressing some of the challenges that you've raised, but maybe there's some other initiatives that are underway as well that you could speak to?
Yeah, so there's a few things I know mostly about Whistler Community Services, so I'll speak mostly about that. But we have the food bank, so that program is meant to address people's immediate needs and for food, so they can come and access food with us a few times a month and get sort of a couple weeks worth of food, which helps. Again, it's an entry-level program for people who are facing poverty maybe for the first time, and the food bank may be the first access that they get within the community for help. We also have a community fridge, which people can access at any time in our lobby to get free meals. So we have sometimes sandwiches in there, or yogurts, or apples and oranges. It kind of depends on what we have. Sometimes the fridge is empty. It depends on what has been donated, what we have in excess. So it's stuff that's outside of the food bank. It may be stuff that is also offered in the food bank that we have extra of. But it's a way for people to get an immediate meal. So some of the folks that are more marginalized and may not be able to make their own food are able to come and access the community fridge to get a quick meal.
And when is that accessible?
That
What
is
sort of hours?
accessible during our open hours from Monday through Saturday. So during Whistler Community Services opening hours, it is right in the lobby for anybody to access. We also have a hot meal once a week in conjunction with the food bank, but it's open for anybody. So we get community members coming who may not access the food bank but just need a hot meal. And we also get people who just want to connect with community and meet more people. And it's a great resource for that. So we have people connecting who are using our services. We have volunteers eating with us, staff members. It's just a great community event that happens once a week. It is every Wednesday at the lunch is usually prepared to be ready around 11 or 11:30. And again, that is open to everybody, whether you're in need or not. It is just a great community builder. Then we have our school lunch program. So we have in all the schools in Whistler, we have food available 3 days a week for students to access in their schools. No to little questions asked. They can just, if they're in need, they can go and grab things like a sandwich, cut vegetables, and apparently the vegetables are one of the most popular items, which I think is really cool.
That's good to hear.
So some people who maybe they're not getting as many fresh vegetables, or maybe they're like my kids and enjoy fresh vegetables, and they're accessing those when they need them. And then we have what I think is the most important program at Whistler Community Services, which are our outreach workers. So what I tell people who access the food bank that is an outreach worker is a confidential space to talk about what's going on in your life and connect with other services if you need more long-term support. So Whistler Community Services has a variety of programs that they can offer that can help people financially in other aspects of their lives other than food, which obviously they run the other ones that are food-based as well, but they have access to other programs that help people access other programs that will also help them financially. And they're just a place to talk about life, and life can be stressful sometimes. It's great to be able to connect with somebody and get that support. So while at the food bank, I'm able to meet people's immediate needs, the outreach workers are able to take that a bit further and help people possibly move forward out of the situation that they're in. But all of these programs take a lot of money, and it can be a struggle sometimes to make sure that we have enough resources to develop the programs that we need in order to support the community in need. So it's great to have, we have a big fundraiser tonight. We have other food drives. We're coming into our busiest season for the food bank as far as donations go. We're getting into what people call the giving season. I would hope that people are able to and feel empowered to give 12 months of the year. But the reality is that we get the majority of our donations in November and December. That will help sustain the food bank for about 6 months worth of time. So we hope that people are generous and can help support those in need in Whistler. And we have been struggling a little bit lately to access as much the funding we need to continue the supports we have at the food bank. So the more people are able to give and support those in need, the more we can help those people and provide them with great local, fresh food.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. What a tremendous resource and set of offerings that we have in our community. It really speaks to that kind of wraparound support that you were talking about earlier of how we need to build and support community. So thank you so much, and hopefully that's inspired lots of listeners to get involved or to support if they can, how they can. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And like all good things, this edition of Whistler's Vital Signs has come to an end. Please be sure to turn on your notifications and join us for our next installment. Whistler's Vital Signs is a podcast series developed to help distribute the facts and findings as contained in the annual Vital Signs Whistler Report and related programs. For more information on Whistler's Vital Signs, please visit the Community Foundation of Whistler online at whistlerfoundation.com. Whistler's Vital Signs podcasts are brought to you by the Vancouver Foundation, the Community Foundation of Whistler, and 101.5 Whistler FM.